You can sit alone in an empty forest and feel completely at peace, but you can also stand in the middle of a rushing city crowd and feel an agonizing, suffocating sense of total isolation. This analysis outlines a crucial psychological distinction. There is objective solitude, simply being physically alone. And then there is perceived isolation, the subjective, internalized feeling of loneliness, regardless of who is standing right next to you. For ancient human ancestors, sticking with the tribe was the only way to survive. Getting separated meant starvation or becoming prey. Because of that ancient hardwiring, the modern human brain still views a lack of social connection as a mortal threat. It interprets the feeling of loneliness as a literal, immediate danger to your life. Perceived isolation triggers an ancient biological alarm, trapping the modern mind in primal panic. The moment a person internalizes this feeling of isolation, the brain's primary fear center, the amygdala, fires up. This activation floods the bloodstream with cortisol. The body enters a state of chronic fight or flight, driving up stress levels and causing systemic inflammation. While stress hormones spike, the brain's reward system shuts down. The production of dopamine and serotonin plunges, stripping away the ability to feel pleasure or positive reinforcement. Looking at the clinical breakdown here, we see exactly how elevated cortisol disrupts sleep and weakens immune function. And right below that, the text details how the complete lack of positive social reinforcement directly starves the brain of dopamine and serotonin, causing deep apathy. In this state, the brain prioritizes immediate physical survival over emotional regulation. It shuts down non-essential functions, rapidly exhausting the body's energy reserves. Long before a lonely person attempts a social interaction, their body is physically drained, exhausted from fighting a war against an invisible predator. This biological lockdown forces the mind into a state of hypervigilance. The brain becomes overwhelmingly sensitive to every tiny environmental cue. This causes severe cognitive distortion. An isolated person often misinterprets neutral situations or someone's resting facial expression as active hostility. Without external social feedback to ground her thoughts, the individual's mind closes off into an echo chamber. Irrational thoughts bounce around and amplify, entirely unchecked. This research explains exactly how small problems catastrophize when there are no social mirrors around to challenge our cognitive biases. As the document explicitly states, the lonely mind overthinks, overanalyzes, and eventually overwhelms itself. This cognitive distortion crafts a hostile reality for the individual, making the outside world appear too dangerous to re-enter. Facing an agonizing existential void and a loss of meaning, the psyche scrambles to manufacture connection artificially. Desperate to fulfill its biological needs, the mind develops intense, one-sided parasocial relationships with online personalities, or assigns human traits to inanimate objects and AI. Meanwhile, actual communication skills begin to rust. When the individual does finally interact with a real person, they might awkwardly overshare a backlog of repressed thoughts or completely miss basic social cues. Because the world appears hostile and actual interactions feel incredibly awkward and exhausting, the individual retreats further to protect themselves from pain. We can map this entire causal sequence. Perceived isolation triggers a biological threat response. That stress causes hypervigilance and a distorted reality. That distortion makes social interaction painful, leading to further withdrawal, which guarantees even deeper isolation. The feeling of isolation actively engineers the exact behaviors required to ensure the person remains completely alone. Effectively helping someone requires treating the systemic neurological lockdown at its source. Telling someone in this state to just put yourself out there is ineffective. It places a heavy burden on a brain that is currently wired to see social situations as life-threatening events. The clinical recommendation outlined here requires immense patience, deeply safe environments, and exceptionally low-pressure interactions. The immediate goal is gradual, sustained exposure to trustworthy people to slowly disarm the amygdala's threat response system. Breaking the paradox of loneliness is the painstaking process of convincing a terrified brain that it is finally safe enough to belong.